NFC West predictions, Alex. Fascinating division. Let's take a look at these teams. Let's start with the LA Rams because we know this is a team that lost one of the greatest defensive players of all time, and Aaron Donald decided to hang it up. They still have one of the best coaches in the game. They still have one of the top quarterbacks in the game, even though he's getting a little older. Of course, they have two unbelievable wide receivers. But I want to start on the defensive side because I think possibly a bigger loss than Aaron Donald might just be the loss of their defensive coordinator. And look, this isn't a shot at Chris Shula, who they're bringing in, but we know Raheem Morris was a very good defensive coordinator for this team. He's now the head coach in Atlanta. A lot of changes in LA. They've made some improvements through the draft and getting younger. Of course, they bring in Jared Verse, Braden Fisk to go along with some of these other young guys up front to try to kind of replace Aaron Donald with some younger faces. Where are the Rams in 2024, and how close are they to closing the gap between them and the 49ers?
So we'll stay right there since we're talking about closing the gap between what we think and we're going to talk about later with the 49ers and a lot of things they got going on. I don't know if they've closed the gap as much as we think, but what I do believe is they've drafted very well and they've gotten younger in the places and they've hit on those later draft picks, which is really the bread and butter of a true GM. Because most of us can really pick a first or second rounder. It's really that third through fifth rounders where you find those gems like they found with Ernest Jones, actually who they traded. And since we're talking about defense, right now their middle linebacker situation is putrid, at least from what we know. So it's two undrafted free agents in the middle. They play in a 3-4, so it's two undrafted free agents in the middle, and Christian Rosenboom and Omar Spates. Do what you want with that. And then we know about Kobe Turner. We know about Byron Young from last year. But again, like you said, there was an Aaron Donald in the middle to allow those guys to get off and see a lot of one-on-ones. But you bring in Brandon Fisk, you bring in Jared Verse, who's going to play outside linebacker. So perhaps with a lot of these young guys, a lot of these young, fresh guys, they're going to be able to step up and gradually get a lot better. I think the issue really comes, like I said, outside of those two middle linebackers, is really going to be in the defensive backfield, where you brought over Tre'Davious White, good young player, but as he's gone and had ripped up his knee twice, he's not the player that he was. I'm not sure he'll even be able to get through the entire season. Unfortunately, due to injuries, they picked up Darius Williams, who's really more of a journeyman. So it's going to really be up to those guys up front in order to help those guys in the backfield. And then usually if you have a good pass rush, that'll help those guys and help them develop. But like you said, Raheem Morris, who's excellent with defensive backs, being a defensive backs coach coming over from Tampa Bay, that was something that he was a particular expert on. And unfortunately, he's no longer there. But if you go to the offensive side, I think everything starts with the signal caller and Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford. So if you have those two guys on the same wavelength, your offense is going to pretty much look good. Puka Nacua, we're hoping that he grows on what he did last year. Cooper Kupp, if he stays healthy, that makes a formidable 1-2 punch. When you start talking about that third receiver, not necessarily the slot, but the third receiver in DeMarcus Robinson, I can see Tutu Atwell pushing him out of that starting job because unfortunately he's more of a bench player, not as much as a starter. But that offensive line is going to look a lot better. Bringing over Jonah Jackson, who comes over from arguably the best offensive line with the Lions, which tells me, Brad, that they're going to run a lot because they drafted in the third round. They already had Kyron Williams, who they hit on, as I was speaking to before, a fifth round pick, who was very good last year. They also drafted, Blake Corum from a running school and what they did at Michigan. So it tells me they're going to load up and do a lot of things running, and there's going to be a lot of play action and motion going on with this team. But as far as what they'll do, I have them closer to what they did last year and have them at 10-7.
Yeah, we saw last season that they kind of changed some of their rushing philosophies, to your point, and they had a lot of success with Kyron Williams. I think you're right. I think they're going to lean on the run. They shuffled around the offensive line a little bit, bringing in a guy like Jackson, like you mentioned. Now we're going to see Steve Avila moving to center. Like I said, it's going to be some changes here, but they have the pieces, they have the coaching. I just don't think they have the roster quite yet to compete with the San Francisco 49ers, but I think it's a very good team. I think it's a sneaky good team that might overachieve this year. So Vegas has the Rams season win total at 8.5. I'm going to take the over. I think this is a team that could get to 9 or 10 wins and be in the wild card mix and be a team that really might surprise some people this year, especially if some of their key players can stay healthy. Alex, let's move on to how about the Arizona Cardinals? Or no, how about we'll save that? We'll go to the Niners. Since we were talking about the Niners, let's go to the San Francisco 49ers. We know this is a team that came up just short in the Super Bowl last year, one of the best rosters in the NFL. What do the Niners look like this year? We know that just recently in the news broke that Brandon Ayuk was able to sign a big deal to stay with the 49ers after all the rumors that we thought he was going to be on the move. They end up finding a way to retain him. But this is still a team that has big time Super Bowl aspirations. What do you make of them this year? Do you think they're still the favorite, not only in this division, but possibly in the NFC?
Right. So I'll start with Brandon Ayuk. I did make a hot take that I had Brandon Ayuk getting traded before this season started. It did not happen. It came this close, but that's okay. It still didn't happen. He signs a 4-year, $120 million deal with $76 million guaranteed. That puts him fifth overall, tied with Tyreek Hill in terms of yearly money in 30 million. So there's the first mistake they made. I'm sorry, the first move that they made that they took care of. But in terms of what they look like, as you said, they're going to look like the favorite. That is a lot of firepower in the receiving core. Let's talk about Brandon Ayuk, Debo Samuel, Juwan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall, and let's not forget about the steady George Kittle when healthy. All of that looks great in terms of weapons. And again, we're going to give credence to the signal caller as well as the play caller and Kyle Shanahan as well as Brock Purdy. And then we can't forget the best running back in the league and Christian McCaffrey. We'll see if Derrick Henry has anything to say about that before the end of the season. But the issue with this team and with this offense will always be what it was and what we saw in the Super Bowl, that offensive line. And as of right now, Trent Williams is not playing and he is not traveling with the team. So that's big issue number one, because we saw when Brock Purdy doesn't have the time, we see what type of quarterback he is. That's not an indictment against him. That's just really any quarterback, just like no difference than when people saw Tom Brady getting rushed up the middle. He's a different quarterback. It's the same thing with Brock Purdy. He sees everything, he can make every play, but if that offensive line can't hold, they're going to have an issue. And if Trent Williams, who's an older player, is not there, it doesn't matter. All of those weapons will perhaps become moot, and even the play calling may not be able to save with the terms of the defenses that be able to face. However, I expect Trent Williams to come in. It'll probably take them 3 to 4 games to get caught up before they start to take off. So you might see a lull in the beginning, and then maybe that second quarter of the season, it'll start to pick up and they begin to go on a run. Now, defensively, there's a lot to be desired. They, have changed defensive coordinators. They're now going with Nick Sorensen. Those of us who may remember him, the safety from Jacksonville fame, if I'm not mistaken. Nick Bosa, we know what he is. Javon Hargrave. Now, they are very thin now at defensive tackle because they let Armand Armstead go to the Jaguars, and we know that Cleveland Farrell was weak before, but they did bring in Leonard Floyd, so maybe that is an upgrade from what they had last year. As remember, they also had Chase Young for a bit of the season as well. They brought over Devontae Campbell because, unfortunately, there was a huge injury in the Super Bowl, and that player is now out. I don't recall his name, Brad. You can yell it out if you remember it. But obviously, Fred Warner is still there. And at that weak side, at that strong side linebacker, they're going with an undrafted free agent in Demetrius Flanagan Fowles. I'll wait to pause if anybody knows who that is, and that's not an indictment against him. Tre'Davious Ward looked like a great corner last year. Hopefully he continues. Hayufunga coming back off of injury. Hopefully that strengthens the back end of that defense some more, along with the rookie from the third year rookie from 23, Jair Brown. So perhaps that gets a lot better. But this defense is very thin. If any of the big guys, and we don't wish injury on anybody, but if Fred Warner or Nick Bosa goes down, they're going to have a lot of issues on that defense and what they're going to do next. And hopefully Nick Sorensen is able to step up and catch up if should anything happen. Right now, I do still have them as the class of the NFC. So I do have them at 12-5, but I might drop that down to 11-6, just given the fact that I expected Trent Williams to be in camp and his situation to be handled by now. But since it hasn't, I'm actually going to take them down one win and take them down to 11-5. Excuse me, 11-6.
Yeah, I think the the price tag for Ayuk might have been a little high, but look, I get it. It's where the market is right now. Being able to retain him was big because it keeps this Super Bowl window alive with all the weapons they have. I think this is still a very dangerous team. I think Christian McCaffrey has to stay healthy again. They put a lot of miles on those tires in the last couple of years, so hopefully he can continue to look like that guy. The defense, to your point, I don't know if they'll be as good. I do think Hufunga at the safety position. This guy was an all pro, big time player coming back for them. I think that's huge. I think adding, like you said, Devondre Campbell to go with Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw. I think at that point you're looking at the best linebacker group in the NFL. They've added some depth here on the D line, but they've lost some key pieces. I think Leonard Floyd is a huge pickup, though. This was one of my underrated moves that we highlighted on the podcast a while back because this is a guy that's still playing at a very high level. I think he really adds something to this group. But yeah, when we look at this team, they also added Renardo Green in the second round to help out the secondary, but he's young. So there's going to be some holes there, but I think, let's face it, this is an offense that can hang 30 on just about anybody. I don't think they have to be the 85 Bears of the 2000 Ravens to be a contender. I think they just need to be good, and they will be. I'm looking at Vegas right now. Vegas has their win total at 11.5 wins. That's about where I have them. I think I'm going to take the under at 11. I don't know if they get to 12, 13 wins. Look, they've got a first place schedule. It's the NFL. I mean, it's tough to get to 12, 13 wins, right? But I do think this is a team that if their key guys stay healthy and with the coach and the quarterback, of course, that they have, I think that they'll be in the mix again in the NFC. Alex, let's jump to the Arizona Cardinals. This is an interesting team, and this is a team that, quite frankly, we have very different opinions of. Where do you sit with Arizona this year? Because look, this is a team that's made some big moves here, some new faces. Of course, I love the draft pick of Max Milton, a guy that we talked about that I think was very underrated. I like that they picked up Trey Benson to add to the running game. Of course, Marvin Harrison Jr., the highly touted wide receiver rookie coming in to help out with Kyler Murray, giving him a big target. They've had a nice offseason. But where does Arizona stand here, year two with their new head coach and with Kyler in this squad? Can they make some noise? Can they surprise some people this year in the NFC West?
Okay, Birdman hands. So Arizona has been a pop team, a team that I thought was going to pop. That doesn't mean they're going to go and make the playoffs or anything like that. But I had mentioned to Brad coming out of last season, even before the draft, I said, I think I really want to take a look at Arizona. I like what I saw the last 7 games from Kyler, from the offense, and from the new coaching staff. They seem to be turning a corner. And like you said, with their draft, I'm now firm on the fact that I am a believer in the Cardinals. And more specifically, where we'll have our point of contention, Kyler Murray. So like you said, you mentioned all the draft picks. I'd also like to mention Xavier Weaver from Colorado did make this team. And I think he's a sleeper receiver for this team because there's Marvin Harrison. And then after that, there's just some guys that are just solid guys that I think at any one point in time, Xavier Weaver could probably jump up and steal some snaps from either Michael Wilson or Greg Dortch. So I'll say that. They did solidify the offensive line a little bit more. They did draft Paris Johnson, and they picked up Jonah Williams if he can stay healthy. And then they got Evan Brown, the guard from Seattle. So I like what they did with the offensive line. And like you mentioned, Trey Benson, I think that's going to be a great 1-2 punch between James Conner and Trey Benson. And the thing with James Conner and Trey Benson is big and fast. So now you have these two big hammers, Trey Benson being at about 6 feet, 225 pounds, and then you have a hammer and James Conner coming at you at 6 feet, 233 pounds. That's going to make some great play action passes to Marvin Harrison as Marvin Harrison Jr. Let's be clear, and then whoever else is on the receiving court. And we cannot forget the emergence of Trey McBride. That's a fantasy. That's a fantasy alert right there. Trey McBride. He should be a sleeper tight end pick for anybody that's drafting this upcoming weekend. Now the defense does leave a little bit to be desired for, but the scheming of Jonathan Gannon is one of the things that I like that I saw last year. So I'm going to trust that he's going to be able to help still scheme because they don't have the heavy hitters that you would want. They don't have that, that big time pass rusher. So they're generating a pass rush. So there's none of these names are going to really stick out to you. If I were to mention anybody outside the fact of Buda Baker, who's just a hard-hitting safety and the veteran leader of this team, and then Max Melton, who is going to be a starter out of our Rutgers in the second round. I do like him a lot. So there's not a lot of guys on this defense, but they're going to be able, but they're fast. They're coached very well. I expect a lot from this team. And when I say a lot, I expect a leap, which would be a huge leap for Kyler Murray, because to me, he is a season behind the jump that he should have had due to injury and due to incompetence in coaching. Yes, I said it. Sorry, Cliff Kingsbury. You just have to hold that. But with all that being said, I have them at 7-10. That's 3 wins more than they were last year at 4-13. I have them 7-10, but being competitive every single game where we'll be having a different discussion at the end of this season going into the 2025 season.
Yeah, Arizona, I like a lot of the moves they made. Like I mentioned, I think they had some nice draft picks here. They've added some nice talent to this roster, but the defense is a big, big work in progress. They virtually have no linebackers. They virtually have no defensive line. They really have no defensive front at all. I mean, this roster has a long ways to go on the defensive side. I think the secondary should be decent, but there's some serious holes in this team. And I'm going to start with the most obvious one. That's Kyler Murray. Look, he's not the guy. I said it coming out of college. He's not the guy. He's never shown me that he can be the guy. Not only is he inconsistent, he's never healthy. So when you factor in the health issues, the lack of maturity, the lack of leadership, he's not a franchise quarterback. He's just a name at this point because he was a number 1 pick. I like what I saw from Jonathan Gannon. I like some of the things this team has done, but I'm not buying into this at all. I think they're fool's gold. I'm taking the under and hitting it hard here. So Vegas has them over season win total is 7.5. I'm hammering the under on 7.5. I think this team is picking in the top 5 in April.
Wow. I mean, well, I'm under 7.5 as well as 7, but I don't know if they're picking in the top 5. Plus, stay away from my Raiders.
All right, let's wrap this up here with the Seattle Seahawks. Alex, this is a team that I think a lot of us expected big things from last year. It didn't come to fruition. Now they bring in a new coach and Mike McDonald, former defensive coordinator for the Ravens. Where does this team go now that you have Sam Howell comes over at quarterback? Now we know that they still have Geno, of course, but he really hasn't looked like the same guy he was 2 years ago. Can he bounce back and look like that player again, or was that a flash in the pan? They've got some young talent on this team. They've had some nice drafts the last couple of years. I don't really know what to make of this team as far as being able to make noise in the NFC West, though.
Okay, so I'll start with the offensive side of the ball. I think DK, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, I think they have one of the definitely have a top 10 starting wide receiver room. I'll say that. And never mind. I was going to talk bad about a player, but you know what? I'm going to be a better person in 2024. But the offensive line, we know what they did in the draft 2 years ago and last year. So that offensive line, if healthy, they should still be good. Noah Fant, I feel like he's yet to be unlocked with his full potential. His Iowa teammate TJ Hawkinson has taken off and has shown, but Noah Fant kind of teeters on that average when he has that speed and that size. I expect more from him, So I'm not sure if that's the quarterback or the offense. So we'll just have to wait and find out. Like you said, this is entirely new coaching staff. The running back room should be one of the better running back rooms with Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, but each has had injury prone seasons. Kenneth Walker, when healthy, has shown he could be a 1,000-yard back, but he's yet to have a full season. And Zach Charbonnet was injured all through last year. So perhaps if both are healthy, that offense will then help Geno Smith. But this isn't really a hot take. I do see Sam Howell taking over this team somewhere in the middle because I don't have them being that good at all. Defensively, Mike McDonald, I would expect that is his side of the ball. I think they're really going to be tough on run defense. Jerron Reed and Jonathan Hankins in the middle of that defense. Jonathan Hankins has forever really been a run stuffing defensive tackle. So with him there, I expect him that you won't be able to run. You have a hard time running against this team. The linebackers, we did see that they did bring over Jerome Baker from Miami. But we'll have to see. They let Jordan Brooks go, which is funny because Jerome Baker came from Miami. Jordan Brooks ends up in Miami. So the linebackers are something to be desired for. They're now more in a 3-4 as opposed to the 4-3 of which, Pete Cowell was running. So we'll have to see how they do with the new changeover to this type of defense. And then you have the defensive backfield. We know a couple of years ago they had Michael Jackson, Kobe Bryant, and Devin Witherspoon and that defense, Tariq Woolen, who all kind of showed out. But last year they kind of were teetering on what we were going to see what they were after after offenses caught up to them. From what I see on their current depth chart, they've kind of moved Devin Witherspoon in that nose and the nickelback position. Now, one thing I liked Christian Gonzalez over Devin Witherspoon. Devin Witherspoon is very reckless with his body, and he doesn't have the size to carry the type of way that he plays. So perhaps they moved him in the nickel a little bit more to kind of not have him in those plays as much and maybe just be more of a defensive back because he is a little bit reckless and he's just going to get injured doing that. But I don't know too much about this team or how I feel about them offensively because these are unknown coaches to me. But what I will say is I think the defense is going to look good and then perhaps they should be able to step up. But unfortunately, I have them last in the division. What I have them at? I have them at 5-12.
Yeah, hard to know really how to predict this team. I think the big question mark, and you hit on it, is a quarterback, and of course with the rookie head coach. It's just hard to predict what this team is going to look like. I don't think Geno Smith's the guy, and I'm with you. I would not be shocked if Sam Howell took over this job. Now they got rid of some key guys on this defense, like you mentioned, Jamal Adams, Jordan Brooks, Bobby Wagner, some guys that have been in Seattle for a while because they don't fit what Mike McDonald wants to do. So he brings in some guys that kind of better suited for his system. Jerome Baker, Tyrell Dodson, defensive tackle Byron Murphy, guys that I think are more likely to fit kind of what he wants to do. But I think changing the scheme, changing the culture, so to speak, it's a big change, and it's hard to do that all in 1 year. I think this is a team that maybe you look at in year 2, year 3, maybe then Mike McDonald can kind of get his fingerprints more on this team, but I don't see it year 1. I think this is a team that finishes really probably towards the bottom of this division. I think them and Arizona are kind of battling towards the bottom here. Let's look at the over-under season win total for them. Vegas has them at 7.5 wins. So just really tight with Arizona, both with 7.5 as the season win total for Vegas. I'm going to take the under on that too. I think this team is probably a 6 or 7 win team at best. I think they have the talent to compete. Of course, they have a great home field advantage. And I do think Mike McDonald will have this defense playing better, especially in the second half of the year as he kind of incorporates his system. But not expecting a whole lot from this team. I think right now we're looking at a division that has clearly 2 top-heavy teams, one very top-heavy team, of course, and the Niners that are a legit Super Bowl contender, and a very good Rams team. I think these other 2 teams are still in rebuild mode.
You know what, Brad? Just going over what we just talked about, I already know who I have. I've narrowed down my Super Bowl picks to 2 teams already. And you know what? The other thing is, do you care to make a wager on the Cardinals?
For a season over-under win total?
Well, no, just what we have, because we're both taking the under because I have them at 7. It's 7.5 right now, but I have them looking really good. And you know, we watch football from a certain with a third eye as opposed to our two eyes. I think you're gonna be thoroughly surprised with Kyler Murray and thoroughly surprised with what the Cardinals do this season.
Yeah, we will find out, Alex. Like I said, I didn't have much trust in this guy to begin with. I know you made the joke that went borderline viral about him
Yeah.
being more into Call of Duty than he is into his iPad and studying game tape. And look, I think that's been the main issue for this guy for a long time. I just don't think he has the heart, the drive, the desire to be a franchise quarterback. I don't think he has the leadership, the maturity. We know he has the skill set. I don't think that's a question. I think the kid is obviously very talented, but quarterback is more than talent. It's a leadership position, and I don't think he has those traits. I don't think he has what it takes to be a true franchise quarterback. On top of that, with his size and the fact that he runs around a whole lot, it tends to lend itself to a lot of injuries. So his availability has also been a big issue for him. Between those two things, I am out on him and this team. But what's the wager, Alex? Why don't you tell me here? What are we betting on here?
I don't know. You know what? I didn't think about it until just now. So maybe we'll come back and maybe you'll have to tune in to the audio pod to hear how that goes. But I will say I feel a future Kyler Murray YouTube short where Brad is apologizing to me.
All right, man. You heard it here first, guys. We'll catch you guys next time. Be sure to hit the subscribe button, guys, here on YouTube so you can check out all of our future content, YouTube shorts, and videos like this. And of course, go check out the links in the bio so you can listen to the audio version of the podcast as well. Tons of great NFL and college football content for you guys.